I want to draw attention to the presence of a caldera under Yellowstone, not just a place with hot springs. This is a supervolcano, a sleeping giant that could wipe out the continent. We are monitoring the activities of this giant that is about to wake up, and we are waiting for confirmation of this. I'm talking about a 100-ton wide crack that has emerged in the supervolcano beneath Yellowstone National Park. Scientists are warning about how this major change at Yellowstone could affect us. The risk of a sudden eruption is an astounding 320%, and when it happens, it will be a major catastrophe. Now let's examine all the details about Norris Geyser Basin and Steamboat Geyser, which contribute to this risk. Let's take a look into the heart of Norris Geyser Basin, Yellowstone's oldest thermal area. This place has thermal features dating back to 115,000 years ago, and the temperature below the surface can rise up to 459 degrees Fahrenheit. Steamboat Geyser is a striking example of Yellowstone's dynamic landscape. This massive 400-ton geyser is a rare natural wonder that erupts at irregular intervals, with eruptions ranging from 4 days to 50 years. However, the situation changed in March 2018. Steamboat now erupts once a week, breaking the record with 32 eruptions in 2018. The following year, this number rose to 48, shattering previous records. This situation raises the question of whether it could be linked to the 320% increase in the risk of a sudden eruption. Let's learn that the irregular behavior of the geyser has been influenced by the rhythmic movement of the basin over an 8-year period starting from 1996. An area of about 18 meters rose approximately 5 inches and then subsided nearly 3 inches over the next 8 years. However, it suddenly started to rise again at an unprecedented rate of almost 6 inches per year. A strong earthquake of magnitude 4.9 in March 2014 stopped this uplift, and since then, the ground has oscillated between rising and falling. Finally, in 2019, it started to subside, but today the basin is about 5 inches higher than it was in 2000. So, could another factor contribute to this 320% increase? This clue points to the supervolcano's potential for superdestruction. The supervolcano beneath Yellowstone National Park represents one of the greatest natural threats the world has ever witnessed. The Yellowstone supervolcano has erupted only 3 times in the past, with the eruption 2.1 million years ago scoring an 8 on the Volcanic Eruption Index. However, according to volcanologists, a 4th eruption could happen sooner than we think. It last erupted 640,000 years ago, and when it does, it could be an eruption that destroys crops, releases toxic gas, and disrupts power supply as far as the Midwest. The United States would face incredibly cold temperatures due to a toxic cloud blocking the sun for years. According to the European Science Foundation, this would be the greatest disaster since the dawn of civilization. The worst part is the cracks that literally began to appear in 2018. Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming was closed due to a significant crack. Hidden Falls and Inspiration Point were closed, and park rangers conducted a risk assessment process. A source from the U.S. Geological Survey stated that the crack posed a typical rockfall risk. The Yellowstone supervolcano last erupted hundreds of years ago, sending 240 cubic miles of rock, ash, and volcanic dust into the sky, leaving a 34x 50-mile depression on the ground. We are talking about a 30-meter supervolcano threat heading toward Grand Teton National Park, folks. Supervolcanoes are ultra-disasters that threaten humanity as much as nuclear or biological warfare. The world could be wiped out by such an eruption. But is this threat taken seriously enough? Unfortunately, no. There are deaths in aviation accidents every year, but there hasn't been a single year where a plane crash killed 10% of the world's population. The Federal Aviation Administration spends over $7 billion annually on aviation safety. In the long run, supervolcanoes can kill far more people than ordinary disasters. We have the ability to prevent these horrific disasters, but we choose to ignore them, putting ourselves in danger. A massive active volcano lies right beneath Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone has been a national park since 1872, but scientists didn't fully understand the size of the volcano until the 1960s. They also discovered that it is completely active and capable of eruptions thousands of times more powerful than the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. Such eruptions could cover the northern Rocky Mountains and nearly everyone in America with meters of ash. Geologists are curious about what lies beneath all the hot springs and geysers in the national park. Naturally, they want to know when Yellowstone will erupt again and how devastating a massive eruption would be. This is a low probability but high impact event and can be defined as a black swan event that could affect both society and the Earth. However, it hasn't been completely ignored. The problem for scientists is that these massive supervolcano eruptions are extremely rare and the most important thing to study. Hidden miles beneath the surface, complex chemistry and mysterious geological features harbor chaotic forces. Recently, a research team uncovered the hidden structure of Yellowstone. They simulated how lava rises from the depths of the Earth and forms two large chambers of partially melted rocks. These two magma chambers are stacked beneath the park's surface, with unmelted rock in between. Lava from the Earth's mantle flows freely and contains very little gas. Its peak is roughly 6 miles down. It cools and hardens when it hits the relatively cold crust at the surface. The upper magma chamber is filled with thick and sticky magma that stores a lot of gas and has explosive properties. It can be likened to a shaken and unopened soda can. The new study explains how this two-tiered geochemical diversity can develop over time and how it was published in geophysical research letters. One day, we might get a snapshot model showing what this system looks like when sufficient melting occurs. These models make the processes leading to a significant eruption interesting because they allow scientists to travel back in time and determine how eruption rates millions of years ago might have been affected. The latest discovery supports previous studies on the twin magma chambers. The bubbling chambers beneath the park have been studied by geologists who measured the speed of seismic waves caused by minor earthquakes. Using sensors placed all over Yellowstone, these waves move more slowly through the heated and partially melted rock structures underground. This allows scientists to create an MRI-like image of the two magma chambers using valuable data. Let's note that the supervolcano at Yellowstone is not technically called that. In fact, Yellowstone is a volcano that creates calderas. Essentially, a volcano that forms a large crater is called a caldera, and these are events that destroy mountains. When visitors to Yellowstone are presented with a map outlining the latest caldera, it can be seen that the central region of the park lacks mountains. These mountains have either collapsed into a large pit or exploded and disappeared. The first major eruption in the Yellowstone region occurred about 2.1 million years ago, and the most recent one was 63,000 years ago. Now, we face a significant risk increase of 320%. Estimating how much magma is needed to trigger an eruption forming a caldera can be challenging, but we should be cautious before thinking anything is happening within the Yellowstone system. Relatively small eruptions that cause lava flows are quite common in Yellowstone. The most recent occurred 70,000 years ago, and there is always a risk of a major eruption. However, volcanoes do not behave predictably, and this is concerning. Meanwhile, Yellowstone is not the only caldera in the U.S. The Long Valley caldera in California is located next to the famous Mammoth Mountain ski resort and just east of Yosemite National Park. This caldera erupted about 700,000 years ago, and although major eruptions are rare, they can be very destructive and deadly. In California, there are 7 volcanic areas with regions of molten rock beneath the surface along the San Andreas Fault. The likelihood of a magnitude 6 or larger earthquake occurring in California is as likely as a volcanic eruption. Therefore, the increased risk of a sudden eruption should always be considered. Now, you might be wondering, what would happen if this supervolcano erupts? The initial eruption would eject large amounts of ash and sulfur into the atmosphere, which could devastate crops and significantly alter the environment. The major eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 caused agricultural failures, harsh weather conditions, and a drop in global temperatures. Therefore, we know how magma can affect the environment. There is a powerful heat source beneath Yellowstone, and as a result, there are many geothermal features scattered around the national park. These can be deadly if handled carelessly. So, what makes supervolcanoes so deadly? A volcano with an eruption magnitude of 8, the highest value on the Volcanic Explosivity Index, is classified as a supervolcano, with a deposit volume greater than 1,000 cubic kilometers. Magma rises from the mantle into the crust, but cannot pass through a crack. Supervolcanoes form a rising magma dome, accumulating great pressures until this magma violently breaks through the crust. This can occur in hotspots like the Yellowstone caldera or large subduction zones like Toba. Areas containing lava and volcanic ash are often associated with large volume supervolcanic eruptions. These have the potential to cause species extinction and permanently impact the environment by triggering a mini ice age with massive eruptions covering the hotspot. Volcanism on the Yellowstone Plateau is relatively recent. The Island Park caldera, Henry's Fork caldera, and Yellowstone caldera were formed by 3 mega eruptions that occurred millions of years ago. The Huckleberry Ridge Tuff, formed by the super eruption of the Island Park caldera 2.1 million years ago, is the largest, producing 2,500 times more ash than the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. The Yellowstone caldera and Lava Creek Tuff were created by the next largest super eruption. The smaller Mesa Falls Tuff was formed 1.2 million years ago by the Henry Fork caldera. However, this does not change the fact that the supervolcano beneath Yellowstone National Park could spew ash thousands of miles across the United States in the event of another major eruption. This could destroy crops and shut down power plants, leading to a major disaster. But this does not mean we need to panic immediately. Fortunately, the likelihood of such an event occurring is still low. One of the reasons people continue to visit Yellowstone is because the supervolcano is an inexhaustible source of doomsday scenarios. A group of researchers examined the visual characteristics of a potential super eruption that could engulf the Midwest in a paper published in Geochemistry, Geophysics, and Geosystems in September 2014. 3 feet of dangerous volcanic ash could bury states like Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and Colorado, destroy vegetation, kill wildlife, collapse roofs, and damage all kinds of electrical devices. In conclusion, a 5-mile deep hot lava pool, fed by a massive gas cloud, is hidden beneath Yellowstone National Park. The famous geysers and hot springs in the park are a result of this heat. However, as the magma chamber rises and cools, the ground above regularly rises and falls. The magma chamber itself has erupted multiple times. The last eruption on the Pitchstone Plateau occurred about 70,000 years ago. The vast majority of these eruptions in Yellowstone have been smaller lava flows, but the potential for Yellowstone to lead to such large eruptions makes the catastrophic super eruptions a distant possibility. According to the Volcanic Explosivity Index, any eruption with a magnitude of 8 or higher that ejects at least 240 cubic miles of material qualifies as a super eruption. This means these eruptions are thousands of times more powerful than even the largest eruptions we are accustomed to. Geologists have discovered evidence of at least 47 super eruptions in Earth's history, showing that Yellowstone is not the only supervolcano in the world. The most recent super eruption occurred about 26,000 years ago at Lake Taupo in New Zealand. More importantly, tectonic plate movement, according to experts, led to the massive Toba eruption 74,000 years ago. This eruption caused a severe global cooling of 6 to 10 degrees and likely significantly reduced the population at that time. However, this is not a strict rule that the Earth experiences a super eruption every 100,000 years. If this were to happen now, could you say that the effects of a much larger super eruption would be much more apparent? Before an eruption, the park would initially experience strong earthquake activity. If these earthquakes, lasting for weeks or months, fractured the rocks above the magma, a super eruption 1,000 times stronger than a typical volcanic eruption could occur. It could spew miles of ash and debris and last for weeks or months. In a doomsday scenario, the lava in the park would be confined to an area of about 40 kilometers. In reality, only about 1/3 of the material would enter the atmosphere. Volcanic ash, a mixture of fragmented rock and glass thrown miles into the air and spread across the country, would cause much of the damage. In their latest studies, scientists have examined both past ash deposits and cross-section modeling of the northern Rocky Mountains, concluding that an eruption would produce an umbrella cloud spreading equally in all directions and then covering the area with 3 feet of ash. This situation could devastate large portions of Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado, Montana, and Utah. Additionally, both the coastline and the Midwest could be covered in several inches of ash, although the exact severity would depend on the season and weather conditions. Realistically, any of these possibilities could occur. The horrifying news is that excessive volcanic ash has the potential to collapse buildings, harm people, plants, and animals. Even a few inches of ash covering a large part of the country could ruin farms, clog roads leading to severe respiratory issues, block sewer lines, and damage electrical transformers. Additionally, a significant portion of North America might have to cease using airplanes. What should we expect if Yellowstone starts erupting tomorrow? This is a big question that scientists cannot predict with certainty. However, they have a general idea, and most highlight the potential for disaster. Let's not forget that Yellowstone has been rising at the highest rate observed in the last decade, with a 320% increase in the risk of a sudden eruption, which is not a good sign. Yellowstone experiences 1,000 to 3,000 earthquakes annually, most of which are of magnitude 3 or less, making them essentially undetectable. But these earthquakes help scientists understand how quickly the magma chamber beneath the park is expanding, making things worse. Recently added magma to the reservoir manifests itself through tremors and the rumbling sounds heard in the park after each of these eruptions. The Yellowstone supervolcano could engulf all the surrounding terrain, including trees, mountains, and other features. If this were to happen in Yellowstone now, an eruption forming a caldera would create a significant natural hazard of about 50 kilometers. The 70-kilometer-long Yellowstone caldera itself contains some remnants of the last eruption in the area known as Lava Creek, but you can still see the thick volcanic deposits left after the eruption. Yellowstone is currently dormant, and scientists are closely monitoring every cough and hiccup. Trying to predict what will happen next at Yellowstone is difficult. The forces accumulated beneath the park for thousands of years may have been contained, but that doesn't mean Yellowstone won't awaken. The important thing is to find out when and how this will happen. Will it eventually turn out bad and too late? Let us know your thoughts on the alarming 320% increase in the risk of a sudden eruption at Yellowstone in the comments below. If you want to see more exciting content, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the button and get ready for an adventure-filled journey with us. See you soon.